Welcome to Needle Felting Owls. But I decided that I'd like to make one that's a little bit more accurate to an owl you might see where I live in Manitoba, just outside Running Mountain National Park, and that would be a great horned owl. Still meant to be cute, meant to be silly, but a little bit more accurate to what we see here. So we're going to start with an 8-inch piece of core wool so that I only use 2 needles. And that's one of the things that I didn't know when I started out. So I ended up buying a lot of supplies I didn't need. So I use my 36 star, in this case a red one, and 38 twisted, which is blue. But you need to know that every company will have their own color coding, so you can't go just by what the color is. I'm going to start by rolling this roving into a cocoon shape, and I want it to end up being about 3 inches long. So I'm going to roll it up, stab it with my needle, and as I go I'm going to fold in the outside edges so it doesn't end up being too long and skinny. I'll felt along where the fold is, but also throughout the center so I don't end up with a hollow form. I'm going to keep rolling just a little bit at a time, felting with my big needle to bind all those scales of the wool together. Felting needles have barbs on them, and that's what catches the scales of the wool. You can buy needles in lots of different places. Some craft stores have them, but I found if the price is too good, they're probably cheap needles. They may bend more easily, and the little barbs can wear out more quickly as well. So investing in a few high quality needles can be worth your while if you're going to be doing a bit of felting. I'm going to continue to roll this all the way up, keeping the ends rolled in so it doesn't get too long. Now that I have the size that I want, continue felting a little bit more just to make sure that it's firm. And if it's too long, or if the ends just get too skinny, I can come at it from the end, and that will help to compact the shape. I decided to make these videos because I do sell some kits, and it doesn't matter how carefully you explain things or how many photos you include, there are always things you wish that you could say. So the video means I can show the steps in my step-by-step kits. I can also give a few little hints on extra things that you can do to make your sculpture even more fun. Now I have the shape that I want, and now I'm going to decide how much of this shape I want to be the head of the owl. This project is a little bit different from my other birds because my other birds are made in 2 parts. But with the owl, I can just define how much I want for the head. And I usually go with about 1/3 being the head. So I'm just going to roll it on my felting surface and stab a line around to create the skinnier neck. As I'm continuing to create the skinnier neck on my owl, I should mention that I'm working on a piece of needle felting foam, but you can use a kitchen sponge, a car wash sponge, a piece of upholstery foam. There's lots of different surfaces you can use, but you do want some kind of surface so that you're not holding your piece in your hand and stabbing your fingers. There, I like the way that I've got the neck. I'm going to roll my owl up in a very thin piece of wool. This is about 4 by 5. I'll roll it up, and I'm going to use my blue needle, my finer needle, just because I don't need to have a lot of the holes that the larger needle can create. So I'm just going to poke it all around to hold it in place. Take the extra on the top and bottom and fold it over. If you find any bits of grass, a little dried grass in your wool, just pick it away and throw it out. It's natural, of course, for sheep to have some grass in their wool, and Depending on the type of wool you're using, it might still be there after it's processed, but it's clean and it's nothing to worry about. In fact, if it's in my core wool and it's going to be on the inside, I might not even worry about it. So I'm going to keep rolling this up in my colored wool, stabbing it to hold it in place. And if I have any areas that are too thin, I can just take another little piece of wool and patch it on top. In the end, it's not going to show. So I'll continue rolling that, stabbing it into place till I get it smooth once again. Now that I have the carded wool nice and attached and snug on the body, I'm going to roll the owl again and redefine the neck once more. To begin to create the face for my owl, I'm going to create an oval that's about 1 inch long and about 3/4 of an inch tall. So I'm going to draw around the outside of my small scrap of white and then take everything outside my little drawn line and pull it to the middle and felt it down. Though it's becoming a little sheet of wool. I don't want this piece of wool to be really very fluffy or thick, so I'm felting it quite a bit, so it's a fairly flat sheet of wool. Now if it's too big, I can trim it down a little bit with scissors, or I can stab the edges, but that's a little tricky to do without getting your fingers, so you can cut it down a little bit if you like. Now this is going on the owl's face, kind of like a mask, but when I finish shaping it, you'll see that it's going to be more like goggles. I want to pinch it at the top and the bottom. And attach the pinched part to the face. Of course, owls, even owls of one species, can vary from region to region, but where I live, they're fairly pale gray. But when I'm finished this owl, I'll show you some ways to add a bit of extra color if you want to, and that's kind of fun. So there's his little goggles. And next we're going to create the beak. I'm going to create a beak by wrapping black wool around a toothpick. The pointy part of the toothpick will be the lower part of the beak. So I want it thicker as it gets toward the center of the toothpick. This is the trickiest part, the most fiddly part of my birds. And if you take your time, you'll be just fine. One thing you have to be careful about is not hitting the toothpick with your needle. It'll bend the needle. And once you bend a needle, if you try to bend it back, you're likely going to break it. So it's best to try to continue to work with that needle if you are able. But when working on a toothpick, it can be helpful to come in at an angle. Then if your needle hits the toothpick, it's not as likely to bend. Your bigger needle is stronger, and so it's best to use it if you can for this part. A little bit of poking, a little bit of wrapping, roll it on your felting surface, and if you have more than you need, just cut off the excess. I'm going to poke at this a little bit more, and then I'm going to take it off the toothpick and make sure that it's felted enough. There's the beak so far. I'll do a bit more felting while it's on the surface, and I think I'm going to go to the finer needle for a little while. What I'm really trying to create is an upside down teardrop, but if you'd prefer, you can make the beak pointy at the top and at the bottom. If it's too long or too fuzzy, you can take a little bit of the extra fuzz off, just with a pair of scissors. As it turned out, my beak was a bit too long, so I just used some small scissors and snipped off the top. and that's fine. I'll just make sure to felt that down really well so that it can't fray later on. When you're attaching the beak to the face, you want to think about stabbing around the outside of the beak shape so that it doesn't get flattened on the face. So most of the stabbing around the outside, but you can put a little bit through the center as well, just to make sure that it's sturdy. Next, I want to create the horns that stick up off the sides of the face. So I'm going to take a section of my black fibers and I'm going to give them a couple of twists in the middle, and I'm going to give that a fold. That's what's going to go on the forehead of the owl. Yeah. So first I'm going to attach the twisted part to the top of the goggles, and then I'll continue out to the side with the rest of it, making sure I have enough to stick out the sides of his head. And I'll trim that down after I get it all attached. There, that's most important, is just getting it attached. And then you can do just a little bit of stabbing to help hold it in the shape that you want. And I'm going to go smaller needle for this. There. A little bit of stabbing throughout the horns. I think of them as eyebrows. And then leaving them sticking out on the side. And I'm going to trim them down a little bit like that. And if they're too bushy, I can come in this direction and take a little bit of the extra off, but I'm kind of liking that. I'm going to create the sockets for the eyes. I want them to be deep set, so I'm going to use my big needle and create a dent, a circle dent right beside the beak. At any point in time, if something looks lopsided or not quite right, you can come in and fix it. You can trim it if you need to. You can add a pinch of wool if that helps to get the shape you're after. Needle felting is quite forgiving. Right now I can see that this beak is a bit fuzzy, so I'm going to just trim that down a little bit. I've got the sockets made. I'm going to use some fine scissors. Because the eyes that I have for the owls usually have fairly thick posts, I need a pretty good sized hole for that. I'm going to check the position and the depth of those holes. And then I can use a little dab of glue on the post. Just put a dab of glue, insert it back into the hole, and then just press them down and hold them for a moment while the glue sets. I'm using Household Goop glue. E6000 is a good glue as well, but there are lots of things that will work just fine for that. Moving on to the wings now. I've got a piece of wool that's about 3 1/4 inches. I want to draw a circle. That takes up most of that, so it's going to be about a 3-inch circle. Doesn't matter if it's a little smaller or even a little bigger. And now I'm going to take the fibers from the outside and fold them to the middle. Felt them down. Fold to the middle, and you'll work your way all the way around, creating a little circle of felt, a little sheet of felt for the wings. It's good to pick this up off your felting surface every once in a while so it doesn't get felted down. Flip it over, do a bit more stabbing. Now, if you can see light through it, or if it feels really thin, you can just take little extra bits that you may have pulled off earlier, and that will make it stronger. And I'll get that all felted down. If your shape is a bit wonky, like mine is, it's okay to take some scissors and trim it down a little. but it's going to leave a bit of a raw edge. So if you do that, it's a good idea to go around the outside a couple of times just to catch all those fibers. Now I'm going to cut this circle in half. And then I'm going to set that piece aside and cut this one in half. And that's going to be the two wings. So it will go like, well, you can place them any way that you like, but I tend to put them like this. So I'm going to do a little extra felting along the top because that's my cut edge, my raw edge. Then I'm going to show you how to give just a little bit of a hint of feather shape to the outside. So I'm going to stab a little from the outside. So this is the outside edge of the wing. It's going to go on like that. So I've stabbed a little on the outside at the halfway, and then I'm going to divide it again and again. So I have 4 feathers on each wing. So poking from the outside toward the center. So that gives a neat shape on the outside, but I also want that to continue in the wing. So I'm working my way stabbing toward that point. And you're just drawing in the wool with your needle. I'm using the big needle. It just makes a more obvious line. Okay, so I'm going to do that on the other one, then I'll be ready to attach them. In creating these wings, I realized that I have a rather thin edge right up there. So I'll just show you how I make that stronger. I'm going to overlap a little piece, felt it into place, just fold it over the top and felt that down. And now it won't be quite so thin on the top. I think I'll be happier with that. All right, attaching the wings. They can go on straight across the body like that, but I kind of like to give them a bit of a curve. It makes them a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more fun. It's a little tricky to hold. So I'm going to do a little bit at the top, curve the wing. It's kind of cupped. I'll do a little bit at the bottom, and then I'll get through the center and also the back, and that'll help to hold it in shape. See what I mean? If I did it this way, flat, that's okay too. But I like the curve. I think it looks more fun. So I'm going to come along the back. And a bit more up the center. And whenever you are unsure of how secure a connection is, or you simply don't want to see the little line, just take a little scrap and felt it into place. It makes it stronger and it looks nice. There his wings are on. I can fix his horns, give him a little bit of a hairdo. All right, now one of the last things to do is to make his tail. So this is the other half of the wings piece, and I want to cut a piece that's about 1 inch by 1.5. So I'm not even going to measure this one. I'm just going to cut so I have a bit of a curve at the bottom, and that's okay. I kind of like that. I'm going to treat it the same way that I treated the wings. Then I want to give the idea of feathers, and you can make as few or as many as you like. I think this one I'm just going to make 3, so I'm dividing it into thirds. So I decided to draw them first this time, and then go to the top of that line and poke it back. Go to the top of the line and poke it back. There's the little feathers. So that's going to get attached back there. And you can have as much of it showing. You can bring it more forward. You can tuck it along his back. It's really up to you. So I'm going to flip it over and attach it. And I may add a little bit of wool just to add to the strength of that. While I can attach to the back to make it stronger, I can also tuck a little bit of extra wool along the front, and I'm going to attach it to the body and also to the tail just to give it some strength. I don't want to hide the feathers that I've created, so I'm just going to fold that back so only a little bit of it is on the tail. It doesn't hide the details. That's the basic steps to make my kit. But, well, I guess the last thing would be to add the ribbon. And all you'll do is put a little snip in the top and a little dab of the same glue you used for the eyes, and then poke the ribbon into the hole. Having the toothpick in that ribbon can really help. So you'll give that a few minutes to dry, tie a knot at the top, and trim it to the length that you like. Some additional things that you can do if you like. It might stray a little bit from a great horned owl, but that's okay. This is your guy. You do it however you want. You can add a little bit of white to his tummy. Makes a nice little detail. Or, if you don't want to do that, you can take some little extra bits of black and do some black tufts. You just take a tiny little wisp of wool, give it a twist, and stab that into place. You get a whole bunch of those lined up along his tummy, cut off the extra, and that can be a fun little feathery detail. So you could do several of those across in a few different rows. So I would just trim the extra on those after I've added a few more. And some other things that you can do involve a different kind of a needle. This is called a reverse needle, and although you can't tell by looking at it, the barbs go in the other direction. So instead of pushing the wool down, it pulls it out. So if you have a surface that's felted firmly enough, so I'm just going to give his tummy a little going over again, you can use this needle to pull out. So this could be another way of making a tummy that's white. Instead of adding wool, is pulling some wool out. And it can be as subtle or as obvious as you like. I think I'm going to leave that. I kind of like that. Another possibility is doing some detail around the eyes with a little bit more of this fine wool top. That's what I had done on the one I showed you at the beginning. So you can take this, it's twisted, and outline the mask, the goggles on the owl's face with that, with a few pokes to hold it in place. It's fiddly, but it looks really nice. Or, if you don't want to do that, you just do it with markers. I don't really think there's anything that's cheating about needle felting. So if something works for you, go for it. Because you might not have all of the colors that you might want to use. So it's okay to add a bit of color with a marker. You can also add some color with powder pastels. I've got a really nice set of portrait colors that works really well with animals. Or some people even use powdered eyeshadow. So you could add a little bit of extra detail, let's say around the wings or the lines that you've drawn, just to give it a little bit more dimension. Those things are all fine. Play around, do what you like. If you find you don't love the color you've added, you can either trim it away or add a little wispy layer on the top just to make it more subtle. But I would encourage you to try lots of things. My other hobby is collecting things that I use to decorate my needle felting. So there's no end of things that you can add, especially if you do after Christmas sales, to add fun little decorations to your needle felting. Everybody needs a rubber duck with a Santa hat. Have fun. I hope you found this helpful. Take care.